Welcome one and all to Shatter Our Souls with Novari. Today we are tackling the Banana Cup at 100cc. And if you were here last week, you know I have a distaste for bikes in Mario Kart. They're clunky, they're awkward, they are great in straight lines, and they're not great around corners, which makes them my personal least favorite type of vehicle in racing games. It just so happens that, well, we're kind of forced into it for our first trip around 100cc, so I gotta learn how to use them. And Sherbet Land here definitely showcases exactly why I dislike bikes. Because there's a lot of obstacles. Be it the penguinos, the other racers, especially the big turtles. We kind of have a lot of obstacles here. And that's all good, all fun and games. It's all enjoyable in the end. We got Koopa Troopa, our resident reptilian individual, cold-blooded in a frosty climate, so we're gonna try to make this as quick as possible. And, yeah. Overall, I find that the Banana Cup is one of the ones that has kind of a weak beginning, but gets stronger the later on you get. Sherbet Land here is a track from the Nintendo 64 version of Mario Kart, and generally overall decent set of cups. And as well, it's one of the ones that does pretty well overall. It has its fair share of decent tracks overall, or fair share of alternative paths. You have the wider path in this track that has all the speed boosts, the faster track that has more, shall we say, more likely to bump into enemies. Regardless of which path you take through the cavern, there's two additional paths to take. And generally I find it kind of interesting that one of the rules that a lot of players take in Sherbet Land is that the goal is to cut off as much of the track as possible through these corners. And I personally love that you have that option, that the solution to a lot of problems in this track is simply just don't drive over it. But what makes that, I think, the best out of this particular track set is that theoretically, the more you cut off, the better off you are. This is kind of a fundamental statement that comes up when you're playing racing games. But very, very few games actually back that up by having the player actually jump over a gap in the road and say, yep, we're cutting this corner off altogether. That's just the way it is. And this is a sentiment that kind of continues into the second track of the cup, Shy Guy Beach. Partially because Shy Guy Beach is one that has a lot of water hazards, and a track that I personally think does a lot very well, and a lot very poorly by comparison to other tracks within the cup. And to explain what I mean, first and foremost, a lot of the track is organic in nature. It's a Game Boy Advance track that was approached with the attempt to salvage as much of what the original track was without necessarily losing much. Result of that is you have lots of jumps, lots of bumps, and a lot of the pathing that makes the track more accessible to some also makes it very high skill ceiling. An example being jumping over the water puddles that go across the track. There's nothing saying that you can't get across it without the more advanced techs or jumping as you go along or without the use of mushrooms. Nothing's saying you can't do that. But being able to jump just precise enough to get over each water puddle means that you are losing less speed, which of course means you're doing better and you're getting further into the track more readily and more easily than somebody who doesn't know the advanced techs. It's a very simple piece of information, a very simple way of approaching the game, and yet every little jump, every little fraction of a second that you save adds just that little bit more that you are capable of shaving off. There is, for lack of better terminology, ludicrous shave potential on this track for most racers. It just so happens that I was distracted when recording, and I made a mess of my attempt. Okay, I was outside the blast radius there. I was well within the blast radius that time. But knowing that, and knowing that I did attempt and buggered up my attempt rather handedly, showcases kind of why I dislike bikes. See, the problem is that bikes they're really good on straightaways when not interrupted by other racers. They aren't great for acceleration if you're trying to boost off the line using the wheelie function, because the wheelie function in itself doesn't really work as intended. It's just kind of there. But also, the point I want to get across here is I want to be very clear on a couple minor things, which are, it doesn't have the same boost potential when going around corners. It has higher speed boost through the wheelies, but any disruption to said wheelie kills all speed boost you would have gained through using said wheelie. So, ironically, in many cases, I find the karts are better, simply because I struggle with finding the appropriate time to wheelie. And that's kind of the crux of my issue here, is I would like to do the thing, I just don't have the capability to do it. Anywho, that's my 2 cents and my kind of grumble guts around that situation. We're in Delfino Plaza, or Delfino Pierre, depending on which version of it you're talking about. I believe it's the Plaza. Anyways, this track is rather winding. And what I like about this track is it actually supports both styles of play rather reasonably. It's, how do I want to word this? It's windy enough that a kart will get all of the speed boosts possible out of it. But it is also simultaneously not so windy as to not allow a player who's been focusing on wheelies and bike style play to get ahead in the track. This is, in my opinion, the perfect balance between a kart and bike style track. Now, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for that, because a lot of people will say that this is a bike track or vice versa. But my point is that most tracks are bike friendly. Bikes are inherently stronger on 9 out of 10 tracks, simply because of how they function, be it their inside drift, be it the wonderful wheelie systems, or otherwise. It's just part of the game. Anywho, we're looking like we're in some pretty good situation right now. A little bit behind the curve as far as I'm concerned. We're sitting at 22 out of the possible 30 points we could be at right now, tied for first with 2 other racers. So it's kind of one of those situations that I would like to be a little further ahead, but it's also not the end of the world. We're going into the 4th track, Waluigi Stadium, which needs no introduction. At 37 points, it means we could very easily win with a 2nd place race. We don't want 2nd place. We want 1st. That's just the way it rolls. That's the way it's going to maintain. And reality is that theoretically, on a perfect run, 3 out of 4 races, you will get, if your opponent gets second place 3 out of 4 races, even if they get first place in the 4th, we're looking at about 47 points, if my math is accurate. At 47 points, that means that you have effectively held most opponents back, and you can get virtually any placement for the 3rd track, or for the 4th. It's not necessarily ideal, it certainly isn't perfect, but it is a significant step up from starting in last place and working your way towards the front. Having that buffer zone means that every race that you get a little bit closer to victory is another race that you effectively can hold your own and get a little bit further ahead of all future opponents. And that's great. So why do I want to point that out? If your opponent gets let's say they get 3rd place or 4th one race, theoretically, you get a free race if your 2nd place racer falls further behind than just 2nd place. Now, due to the rubber band system and what is typically labeled the rival system of Mario Kart, there are 2 things you've got to take away from it. The first is the better you do, the better your opponents do. And the second is to ensure that you always have a player that is comparable to yourself. There is 1 to 2 players that are consistently going to be better than every other opponent by a significant margin. They'll always be in the top 3, typically speaking, unless you do something absolutely ludicrous to mess them up. In this case, the rival system is pretty interesting because a lot of characters end up being stronger than they would otherwise be, and it showcases a lot of rivalries and problems that arise from the fact that these characters have poor relationships with one another. Example being, Mario's rival is typically Bowser Jr. type of character. In Mario Kart, that might not always be the case, where Koopa Troopa might take over and so on and so forth. Each game has its own rival set for each character, generally speaking, don't quote me on it, but that's generally the way it rolls. Anyways, we won by 6 points this time, a lot closer than I would otherwise like it. If you like what you see, I would love if you left a like, a subscribe, and maybe checked out some of the other videos on the channel. We did this entire type of run through all of Mario Kart Double Dash on multiplayer mode. So if you like it, give them a run. And until next time, I hope you all have a fantastic day. That's all for now.